Ming Lindsley. I'm the head of Kenzon. We're a cloud native technology consulting and software engineering company based here in Denver. We're an Amdocs company, and I'm very excited to be sponsoring this conversation with Arlan Hamilton and Ryan Harris. I often find myself in the world of technology as certainly the only woman and the only person of color in many conversations. So the Backstage Capital mission of It Takes a Village, Success for All, and Diversity is Strength are things that really resonate strongly with me and with our Kenzon community. So I'm very excited. We see in our software delivery experience that diversity really brings the strongest technology delivery and also the best workplace. And so I couldn't be more excited to present this conversation. And also just speaking about Ryan and his mission as well, that everybody has that capability to be excellent, and when you embrace your own excellence and strengths, that you really have the strongest impact in the world. So I think that this conversation is going to be a really excellent one, and Kenzon is very excited to be the sponsor. So thank you very much.
Well, all right, let's take it away. Thank you, Ming. Thank you, Kenzon. And let's bring in the star of the week. I am thrilled to introduce not just a venture capitalist, but a risk taker, a pioneer, and somebody who has redefined the term glory days for me. Please welcome the magnanimous Arlan Hamilton. Arlan, welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me. There's a lot of energy. You all are about an hour ahead of me, so you gotta catch up.
Hey, well, we're all excited about you. Congratulations on your best-selling book. It's about damn time. It was a life changer for me. I loved reading it. But let's start with your story about when you approached Chris Sacca to make sure you could grow your company.
Sure. So just the foundation of that is that I founded a venture capital fund about 5 years ago and called Backstage Capital, and we invest in underestimated founders. We've invested in a lot of them. And before I started that, I was not in this, in the venture space, to say the least. And so I would do different things to sort of hack my way into opportunities. And there is an investor, a billionaire investor named Chris Sacca, and his wife, Crystal. They make investments, and Chris kind of was certainly a very well-known figure for a decade, a few years ago. And I wanted to get his attention. I wanted to talk to him about the fund that I was going to be raising or trying to raise. And so there's a lot, that got me to the city. But once I was in San Francisco, I went to see him speak. And I had talked to him online a little bit. I'd been introduced another way of hacking my way to him. And I think, at the time would have been 2015. We weren't talking about race and investing in underrepresented people as much. And so for him, there was a lot of that education, not to say that he wasn't with it. It was just something that wasn't being talked about a lot. So I wanted to talk to him. I didn't know how to get, in front of him. So I kind of went back to my days as a teenager trying to get backstage at concerts. That was my thing. And just for fun, for nothing else but fun. And so she spoke at this big event, and I don't remember any other Black person there other than the people who are the wait staff. So it was this big event. He was the headlining speaker. It was a beautiful event. And I want to talk to him. So I went up to one of the people that worked there. That was a Black woman. She didn't know him from Adam. But I said, hey, you see that guy on stage? I'd like to talk to him about a business deal I'm trying to talk to him about. And without missing a beat, without questioning, without having anything else needed, she said, okay, well, I heard. She said, well, I heard. And he's still speaking, you know what I mean? He's still having this conversation. So she's whispering to me. She said, well, I heard that he is supposed to be upstairs filming something right after this. They're going to take him directly upstairs backstage, but upstairs. And the only way you can get there faster than anybody else taking the stairs is this elevator that's a service elevator. And I said, oh, okay, thank you. And so I started thinking about, how do I get in that service elevator? And all of a sudden she put her hand down and she, behind her, just clicked the button, and she just looked at me and I looked at her, and we knew, and I just edged back into that elevator. It's just like the Homer Simpson gif, you know, just going back in the bushes ever so slightly, edged back. She reached her hand in, pushed the button to where I was supposed to go, and then the doors closed. And when I emerged, I was on a floor where people were getting prepared for his event, for his recording. And I just stood there, acted like I was supposed to be there. And he walked in, and I just, hey, Chris. And so for 30 minutes while he was getting makeup done for this speaking role, this video, I had his ear. And of course, let me stop there and say that, of course, if he had said, hey, that's not cool, I'd rather be alone, or had given me any indication, of course, I would not have forced the subject, right? But it was more like he was happy to see me, and he didn't know I was going to be there, and I got my way back in. So we talked, and by the end of that conversation, he had told me to email him the next day, and he was going to make a commitment for the fund.
Well, I love that story because you talk about workarounds are everywhere, and you worked around a whole conference of people that wanted to talk to him, and you gave your effort, you took your shot. But that wasn't the first time you did that. You kind of mentioned it. And I want to talk about this because so many times being in the right place is just placing yourself there. The Pittsburgh Steelers, they say the #1 rule in getting better is showing up. But you did that starting with a Norwegian pop band, and then later as a manager as well on tours. Talk about those times when you took risks, when you reached out to that Norwegian pop band, when you reached out to 100 different managers, and how did you have the confidence to make those moves?
Yeah, so there are a few stories there. I'll pick out the Norwegian pop punk band Golden Boy. That happened almost 20 years ago. That's 18 years ago, when I was 21. I just turned 21, came across this band. I was working at a bank, but in their data entry section. So I was not even, doing the fun stuff, I think. I was doing data entry. It was mind-numbing work, in my opinion. It's not to say, I was very good at it. And so I had that little bit of a competition, but it was the same repetitive thing every single day. So I would listen to music on my headphones just to get the time, let the time go by. And I came across this song by this band that I just thought was really cute. It wasn't, it was just that I hadn't heard anything like it before, and I thought it was a cute song. So I got in touch with them, and I said, at 21, I said, in Dallas, Texas, I said, I want to see y'all live. I want to see you play live. And they were like, well, we're in Norway. So I don't know how that's going to work. And I said, well, how about if I book a tour for you in the United States? Would you come out here and go on that tour? And they were.
And you'd never done that before, right? You never booked a tour?
Not even close. I was working at the bank. I had worked since I was 15. I had gone to school in Dallas. I hadn't gone to college. I'd done some community college work, but I hadn't gone on to that. It was something that I wanted to happen. So I tried to make it happen. It was that's kind of how my mind works. Like if I see something, either I want it to happen, and mostly it's about like, if I don't see it already, but I want it, I create it. That's just, It's just how it's logical to me, and so they said, yeah, if you can book a tour. I think, it was a lot of like, oh, sure, you give it a try. But it's like, cool, if you can do that, if you want to do that, that's great. Because they're this indie garage band in Bergen, Norway. You know what I mean? It wasn't like they were getting these types of requests on a daily basis. So I said, oh, great. Okay, cool. So they said, yeah, if you book a tour, we will find the money to come over there and go on the tour. And I said, okay. So I taught myself for the next 2 months how to book a tour. And that's a longer story, but I do talk about it in depth in the book. But I taught myself from scratch how to book that tour. I ended up booking them a whole summer of dates across the country in order, which was a feat to get it in order the way we did it. And then I did it a second time and went on tour with them as their tour manager / babysitter / bail bondsman if needed.
Well, and you always talk about information, and we'll get to that. But I mean, your music career and your ability to take those risks has to happen in startups that you fund and you invest with. Of, hey, well, we haven't done this, we don't want to. How do you push people in that moment to say, yeah, maybe you don't do this or you haven't, but just like you said, and I want the audience to hear it again, if I want it, I create it. I mean, that's amazing. How do you help push people in that moment?
To be honest with you, I did spend a lot of time trying to convince investors who have been doing venture investment for a while, why they should be investing in underrepresented founders. I did try to, for years, and I did try to convince them of the general ecosystem being valuable, and then individual companies. And of course, as part of my job today, I still do that individually. But really, it kind of came down to, why should we have to convince people of our worth?
Right.
You know, and I started changing that a little bit when I talked to people. It was no longer, hey, please, can you help us out? It was, you are missing out on something. Do you not understand? You are missing out on something that I'm trying to give you the gift of understanding. You know, taking the time out to share this amazing deal flow of these incredible founders that you do not normally get to interact with. It's almost like reversing the country club idea. Like, I'm giving them access that they don't have. And for those who continue to be blissfully ignorant about it, I just don't have the time anymore. Yeah. And so, and I know you understand that, you know, it's like, you know your value, you know what you can do on the field, you know and so to try to explain that to people, it's like, wait a second, you know, people who could have an upside to you doing well, I'm over here trying to beg them. No, I stopped doing that a while ago. But it took, because I was not just representing myself, it takes that sort of, you know, at least going through that a little bit to get people on board. But then a lot of people just started understanding. It was almost like you could just see within a few minutes if someone's going to get it or not, if they're willing to try to understand. If they're just not willing to try to understand, that's not really I don't think of it as my job to teach them.
And you talk about the underrepresented, and for those who don't know, Arlan talks about in her book, 90% of venture capital funds go to white males. 90%. Not that that's a bad thing, but there's also other opportunity there. And one of the things I love, Arlan, is that you took that underrepresented and you call the companies you invest in people who are underestimated. Were you shocked to find so many companies that were underestimated simply because they were women, people of color, or otherwise?
Shocked? No, because I'm a 39-year-old Black woman in the United States. So I'm not shocked by it. I was disappointed. I thought that the tech world would be that safe haven and that place where you would see so much diversity. I was surprised because I thought you would see so much diversity because of what they promised out in the world, the lip service they paid, right? And I'll go back a moment. You said that it's not a bad thing that 90% goes to white men. Yes, it is. It is certainly a bad thing. It's wrong. It doesn't make any logical sense. You know, I like the logic thing, but it's also not, it's not the right thing. And so that for me is very clear. And the cool thing, I think, is that there are so many white men who I spoke to about this, and I still continue to, and who have invested in us and who have co-invested and just been helpful, who agree. They agree. They're like, wait a second, I didn't know that stat, and that does not make sense to me either. And so it's like, you know, we see that when there is a wrong in the world, there are a lot more people who do understand it than who don't. It's a minority of people who don't get that. So I was not shocked to see that the funding wasn't going there, but I was very excited to see how many founders I would have access to with our thesis and our mandate.
You heard one of those white men you're talking about said in one of the 100 emails you sent, he said these words: "The world needs what you are doing. I want to help." I mean, what did it feel like to get that validation so early in your VC?
I remember that I was living in a hotel with my mom at the time in Pearland, Texas, and close to Houston. And that was actually a text message that came from Sam Altman, who had recently just then been named the president of Y Combinator, and who no longer is, but had it kind of changed Y Combinator, turned it into a rocket ship, really, I think. And for him to say that, it again, I'm reticent to say that it was like, it was a dream come true, because those types of things, I don't feel that way. I feel that we are equal, so I think that he should think that, right? But at the same time, living out of the hotel and being so far away from Silicon Valley and from Denver and from Boulder and from all of those tech hubs, I at the time was like, this guy has his finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in this new tech world in Silicon Valley, especially what I knew back then, right? He's responsible for helping to see where Airbnb goes and Stripe and Dropbox and all of that. And he thinks that it's a crying shame that this fund doesn't exist yet. Mm-hmm. That was, I remember that day very specifically. I went down, I met my mom in the little lobby area of the little motel we were staying in. And I said, I think I'm gonna do this. I think it's gonna work. I think it's going to happen. And she's like, okay, baby, okay. Just like everything was like, the same. But I thought, they can't stop me now, because they made the mistake of telling me that I was right.
Well, I love that. Well, talk about some of the wins you've had. I think it's so important to illustrate to many people who may not know of the successful companies run by minorities that you found. What are some of the success stories of companies you've invested in and the people you've invested in?
Wow. Okay. So we've invested in more than 100 companies, and we invest in them early stage, like really early, sometimes with their first check, sometimes with their first round, in smaller amounts. There are, and then of course, they're all underestimated, underrepresented founders. So there's that extra barrier. So we're right now in our we just celebrated our 5th year yesterday, which is really amazing. Yeah, very excited about that. And so going into our 5th year, I would say we're probably where a lot of other funds would be in their 2nd year or so, because we're kind of that tax that we have. But there are so many. If you think that, if you believe that raising additional capital is a marker of success, like many people do, and I think of it as one marker, of course, then we have many stories like that. Like we have a company called Bitwise that's led by a Latinx founder who is also a woman, who's also queer. She made history last year by raising, I think it was $27 million on a Series A, which is pretty large Series A, to build out a coding education and also a studio model in Fresno and other underdog cities across the country, like El Paso and Jackson, Mississippi, where I was born, and things like that. So that's that made history because of her raising that amount of money. There's also Mommy is a company, MAHMEE is a company that I led their last round. I brought Mark Cuban in for another $1 million, and then brought Serena Williams in to invest alongside. And of course, her story of the birth, the very dangerous birth that she had with Olympia, made this investment really dear to her heart, and also helped amplify it for other women who don't have the same resources, which is what this company works with, is parents of newborns. And we just this year, we've seen Care Academy, which is led by a Black woman, and Mommy is led by a Black woman as well. Care Academy raised $9.5 million on a Series A, led by Impact America, an incredible fund, and Rethink Impact, both impacts in the name. And that's something, again, we invested in a few years ago. And then Carrot, led by an Asian American woman, raised, I think, $24 million. And then Akash, I think Akash is a really interesting story. Really briefly invested $25K in 2017, Black man-led company who I believe is a genius, and I think many others believe that too, named Felix. This was before they had raised $1 million total. We worked with them over the years. They have now raised more than $20 million, and they're going on to raise upwards of $100 million next year, if all goes well. And they're going to compete and do compete with SpaceX Starlinks and with others in the game. And they also, which is really exciting to me, is that they not only compete with those companies, like Amazon came out with their new telecom play, but they supply pieces and parts for some of those competitors. So there's a very clever proposition that they have so that they don't get lost in the shuffle.
All that money, I'm gonna have to make sure you get that DM on Instagram of my email again. You know, I'm gonna give up Backstage Capital. You're leaving a lot of us out of that opportunity.
We're making very small bets because we've only been able to raise a very small amount of money. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, we've been able to raise $12 million. And to be frank, half of that is Mark Cuban's capital. And, you know, big shout out to Mark Cuban, because I think he more than most people see what this is and see what this will become. So we're dealing with 25K checks, 100K checks. Now we have a new syndicate at backstagecrowd.com where you can invest alongside of us. So now we're doing 200K checks and even 500K checks in some cases.
Wow.
But it's not, you know, in the grand scheme of things, where there's billions and billions of dollars streaming through, I think 130 billion went through in venture capital in 2018. Our 12 million is not that much. But what I believe will happen is that the impact of that, I think it's already started. The impact of that, just the fact that, you know, we can be a case study of what is possible. When you really execute on the idea of investing in underestimated founders, instead of just necessarily just talking about it or wishing upon it or making, you know, more and more headlines about it. I think, you know, we, along with a few of our peers who are doing this, are going to lay a foundation that is just much, much bigger than the sum of our parts, if that makes sense.
Well, absolutely. You've been doing it. And we're talking about money. And in Denver Startup Week, there are going to be a lot of people listening right now, whatever color they are, background, they feel underestimated. One of the things I love in your book, you said, to get the money, you got to be the money. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, yeah, I kick off the book like that because it started with a lot of things start with a tweet with me, but it started with a tweet storm I had a couple of years ago and the book came out in May of this year. So I kind of fleshed out the idea of it. But I was saying, you know, everything that I do or that I attempt to do is like, in my opinion, it's like sharing the information, sharing the wealth even. You talked about money a minute ago. I do plan on sharing 90% of my wealth for the rest of my life, you know, sharing it in one way or another, investing, donating, etc. So I feel the same way about information. And so when I say things, I'm not really saying them just to say it, you know, for my benefit. I'm saying it because I want to give as much information to help people bypass struggle as possible. So one of the things I noticed is that a lot of people were coming up to me either in person or online, and they were founders, and they were saying, you know, I need $100,000. I need this, I need that. I want this, I want that. And then I would say, okay, well, I see thousands of companies a year, but I'm right in front of you. So what I want to do is ask you, because I don't know about every industry and every company. I want you to tell me about your competition, about the market. I want you to tell me a little bit about what makes you different. And some people would just be deer in headlights. Like, I don't know my competition, or I don't have competition. And I would have to stop them. And this happened multiple times. And I'm like, look, that can't work. You know, I'm going to be the nicest investor you ever meet. And if it doesn't pass my, you know, standard, it's just not going to, you're not going to make it too far. That's what I was trying to, you know, get across to people. And most of that is just simply taking out a few weeks and learning more about your lane. That's all it is. It's not that you don't have it in you, or that you're not capable of it, or that you're doing something wrong. It's just simply, you know, you got to bulk up a little bit more. You got to be more ready so that you can be ready for your opportunities when they come. So I say, if you want money, And we all know that money attracts money, which it does.
Yeah.
But you don't have money to begin with. You become money. You become the asset. You become what is so valuable with the information that you have and what you're able to do, that people are attracted to you. People with money then become attracted to you. And I don't just say it, I'm living proof of it.
Well, and I love some of that information you shared in your book, and you saying you're going to be the nicest investor they're going to meet. You said people check out family backgrounds, criminal background checks. They're going to interview, all for a $25,000 check. So you're really giving them a leg up on what they're going to expect. And you talk about information a lot in your book, and hearing you speak, people might think, wow, she must have an MBA, a master's. She clearly went to Harvard or somewhere, but you did none of those things. And also did not let that stop you from getting the information you needed to succeed. What are a couple of ways that you found information, books, podcasts, whatnot, that made you successful?
Oh, as you see the books behind me, this is not a screenshot. This is really my bookshelf. 2 or 4 or 5 bookshelves I have behind me. Most of it I've at least gone through, but a lot of it I've read or listened to on audio, which I think is it's a good hack too. Like, don't be afraid to listen to books on audio. And I say Audible or Apple Books or whomever. Don't be afraid to do that. You're still reading, and in a lot of cases, I catch things that I don't catch when I'm reading, on paper, when I listen to it on audio, because I can kind of go back, I can rewind something. It kind of sinks in. It's like that person is talking to you like a guru. Or you're getting that information if it's not a nonfiction, if it's not like a biography, just getting that information. And so that was a big hack for me. I listened to more than I read. And another thing is that I was consistent about it. It was almost like the same way you think about food, the same way you think about other kind of hygienic things that you do on a daily basis. You wouldn't go a day, unless you were fasting for some reason, you wouldn't go a day without having at least a meal, right? So why would you go a day without feeding your mind and feeding your soul in that way, right? Why would you go a day without learning something new? You have the day, you don't let it go, pass you by. It's not like we have an infinite number of days. So the way I look at it is, every single day, unless I'm like really sick or something, I have to learn something that day, or it was not as valuable as it could have been. And I think that's kind of a slap in the face to people. And this is my opinion. I don't want to get too preachy, but to me, it feels like a slap in the face to people who don't have the luxury of being able to read, or being able to have shelter, or being able to, have that sort of freedom. A lot of people are in very different situations, and so to me, it's like almost an honor to be able to take in that information. And again, no matter how you learn or how things kind of come to you, don't worry about what other people are doing. If it's easier for you, if you have dyslexia or anything like that, and it's hard for you to read, hack your way, do it another way, watch videos, listen on audio, have somebody get into a reading club with somebody who loves to read and loves to kind of talk, they exist, I'm one of them, and just sort of like, you give your value and they give their value, and kind of do this together if you need to. But I think like right now, that's a beautiful thing to me, is that right now, no matter where you are, who you are, no matter who you are, and no matter where you are, what your life looks like, what your bank account looks like, you always have the ability to learn more. And so therefore, you always have the ability to heighten your value and your inner value, right? Which directly leads to your confidence. When you know more, you do more, and you feel more confident. And so it all kind of just plays into the same thing.
Know more, do more, feel more confident. I love it. And you talk about, or even earlier in this interview, you talk about, hey, when you get information, share it, whether it's a tweet or not. And one way I loved how you put it was, if you're at a concert, let somebody shorter than you see the stage. And I love the story. First of all, we'll talk, just for a second, Janet Jackson, I'm a big fan as well. Her song, Would You Mind, might be responsible for 2 of my 3 kids. I don't know. But a lot of people are learning right now of various different topics: startup, funding, growth, but also, the value of Black lives, the trouble even myself and yourself go through as accomplished individuals in society anytime we leave our house. What does it mean to let someone shorter than you see the stage?
To me, it just means that we all, no matter who we are, we have a privilege. We have at least a privilege. And that, I think a lot of times in this sort of the way that things get kind of, I was gonna say truncated, but like, summarized, sometimes elegantly and sometimes not online, these bite-sized ways that we take things. Sometimes we forget that, like sometimes it appears as if there's a you versus me or us versus them situation. Like all white people have privilege and therefore bad. All Black people are down and out. Like none of this is true. None of this is true, right? It's all nuanced and it has layers to it. And one of those layers is that no matter who you are, again, there is a privilege you have in the moment. And when I say that, I mean mostly people who are able to see this, right? We are all privileged if we're able to see this, no matter what our situation is. And so I think it's up to us then to never get complacent with where we are. If you are, and that means for yourself and for others. So it started off with me trying to talk directly to, let's say, white men and white women too. Let's not always put white men, getting the brunt of this. Like, let's talk about that in the United States. It started with me talking there and saying, look, let's just look at it a different way. Because I had a lot of people come to me and they're like, a lot of white people were like, you're picking on us and I don't have privilege. And it's like, first of all, privilege is almost a fact. It's what you have. I say that privilege is something that you are kind of born into because of maybe your race or maybe your gender or maybe your affluence or something like that. And then entitlement is something that you have to go out and try on and use on purpose. So I'm not calling you, sometimes I think people think, but if we're calling you privileged, we're calling you entitled. Those are two different things, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the things I said about privilege is don't think of it so much as like you might lose something or you may be accused of something if you were talked about privilege. Think of it more like this. You're at a concert and think about, I miss concerts. I bet everybody else does.
Me too.
Yes. Think about a place you like going that it has a standing room only policy, right? And it's a smaller place, but it, packs people in, and you've seen some of your best, bands or artists play there. It's just your place. Now, a lot of times we have been in a situation, even at bigger concerts, we've been in a situation where somebody has tapped us on the shoulder and said, hey, I can't see the stage. Do you mind moving over? Or we've been the person tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, you got a big hat on, or you're a little bit taller than I am. Can you please move just a little bit to the right so I can see the stage? Because, they paid the same amount of money to get there.
Right.
And most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, and think about it for yourself. Don't think about what other people would do. For yourself, you would most likely say, sure, let me do that. You'd move over 6 inches. That person now sees the stage, enjoys the concert better than they would have before. And the best part of it is that you didn't get any shorter. You didn't lose any of your privilege of height or your privilege of your hat or whatever, right? You didn't lose anything by letting them. And maybe even if you did lose a little bit of that sight to the stage, in the grand scheme of things, this person got to experience the stage completely because of you. And you leave, and that's that. To me, that's what privilege, that's a simplified way of saying what sharing your privilege is. It's not so much about holding on and first, guarding the fact that, hey, I took a lot for me to get here and I'm not privileged. Well, yes, you are. We all are. I'm privileged.
You got Wi-Fi.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. We're all privileged in some way. So first, it's like getting rid of that, like disavowing yourself of that falsity. That's not a word, I'm sure, but whatever. That
we made it one right now.
Yeah, that you are somehow different than anybody else in the world, and that you don't have privilege. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. And the second part is sharing that, and if you sharing your privilege for that moment makes life easier and better for someone else, what is the word? Here's another example of it, and I'll use it using my own privilege. Before COVID, I was flying 2 or 3 times a week, most likely, for 40 weeks of the year. And so it's always getting on and off of planes, always getting on and off of planes. And every fifth time you get on a plane, there's going to be someone in a wheelchair, maybe more often than that, who needs a little extra time to get on. What would it look like if I said, as someone able-bodied walking down the jetway, that what does it look like when you see somebody do this, where they're like, oh God, I can't believe it's taking them so long to get there. All they're trying to do is be on a level playing field with you. They want to get on the plane with you too. They just need a little bit more time. And it doesn't take anything away from me and my ability to walk or hear or see, to let them have the time to get on the plane. And so I just don't, it doesn't sit well with me, with people. I don't trust someone who can't share their privilege. It makes me feel like they're very entitled, and that they're very, I'll say small, have a small vision, like it's just, they're a smaller person. You got to unlock that if you have that fear that's going to somehow go away, or that it's even precious enough to be worried about it going away.
Well, and I remember going on the airplane, and this mother was clear. And as a parent, traveling with kids is crazy, but 5-10 people walked past this mother trying to close the stroller with her baby in the arm, holding luggage. I'm like, can I hold the luggage? Can I fold that for you? And we all still got on the plane. And I love that you make that distinction, that people will not lose something by including someone else, letting someone else see that stage. Well, Arlan, it is Startup Week, so let's talk business a little bit. All right. You said, you gave us the questions you ask founders looking for funding. But let's say, Ryan Harris, I make beautiful blazers. It's a Beautiful Blazer LLC, and I'm approaching Backstage Capital and say, hey, we really like some funding. What are you looking for in my company? What do you look for in the startups that you're interested in investing in?
So that evolves every day, I think, and it's a lot of it is art and not science. And a lot of it is I'm grateful that we have people at Backstage with all different types of tastes and perspectives. So if you go to backstagecapital.com, you can look for our office hours, or you can look for our application process. You can look at our crew to see who's making investment decisions, et cetera. When someone comes to me, or when I look at it, I get pitched every single day of my life, multiple times a day. The thing that catches my eye, something that catches my eye is like, does this affect a lot of people if it goes well? That's one thing. It doesn't have to be life-changing, but does it heighten the quality of life for somebody?
Right.
Something else comes to mind, that I think about is like the founder or the founders, like what sort of energy do they bring? And not talking about like, they don't have to be hyped. Like that doesn't matter to me if they're hyped or low key, introverted, extroverted, whatever. And it doesn't matter to me if they have a polished pitch, because that can be taught real quick, doesn't have substance behind it necessarily. I'm looking for someone who is just deeply rooted in what they're doing. They know their why. They've spent a lot of time strengthening the asset of them. Like I said earlier, they know a lot about their company. They know what they don't know as well, which is incredible, right? Like to be able to find that combination of learning and understanding so much about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and who else is at play, but also having the humility in some cases, or just the wherewithal and the wisdom. In more cases, that's more important to me than humility. To know that you don't know everything is just really evolved for me. And so that's exciting. I think about like, have I seen, this is one I don't often say, but because I think it like goes without saying, but maybe it doesn't. Have I seen like 10 of these before in the last 2 years? That's another thing that comes up a lot. That's a little problematic. Or somebody will come to me and they're like, I'm doing this. And like, yeah, I've seen that so many times. It's not that you can't be better and you can't be the best and you can't make it work. It's just like, what was so compelling about this that you had to make the 10th, the 11th one?
Right.
That's what I got to understand, you know? And of course, as an investor, especially investing other people's money along with my own money, of course I'm looking at, does it seem like it's going to make money? Does it seem like it's going to, you know, explode in a way if it has a little bit of fuel to the fire? But those things have to come first, the things that I mentioned before. They have to come first because there's just so little that we can predict when it comes to like how much money things are going to make. There's just so little. Also, just more and more what you've been able to do without capital or with very little capital or before you've seen me is like really important because there's so many ways to hack your way. I'm not going to give a deficit to somebody who obviously has 2 jobs, who has 3 kids, who got themselves through this MBA, who did this and that, and say, well, why don't you have your whole website and app put together? I'm not saying that. I'm saying, what have you done to get to this point? What have you put together that you think now is should be shared with others? Because at the end of the day, any investor you bring on now or in the future is going to be sharing in the upside of what you do, the good of what you do. They're going to be made richer by you if all goes well. They take the early risk of it not going well, but if it does well, you are making them very, you are at least adding value to what they put in. And so I think the last thing I'll say is like, it makes for a better founding team to see, you know, to be very discerning about which investors you take on. If you have money from every which way, 5,000 here, 3,000 there, 100,000 there, and it's not intentional, but it's just because this person opened up their checkbook, that's not exciting to me. If you have $10,000 from 1,000 people who believe in your product, that's more exciting to me than $1 million from one person who you just kind of convinced to do so. Can I say something before your next question real quick? Because I know that we're winding up. I just want to say thank you to Lynette and to Sharon for your ASL interpreting. Just been very impressed by the interpreting of all of Denver Startup Week, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you to Kenzon for sponsoring this segment. We got a couple more questions for you, Arlan.
Great.
I love what you said in your book because you hear, hey, you got to hustle to make it. Absolutely at times. But you said you want hustle to change to self-care. And I love that. And you've had to take times in your life where you had to take care of yourself, remove yourself from friends and situations. But what does taking hustle and translating it into self-care mean?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, especially if you're learning about me for the first time today, you might already kind of surmise that I am a hustler. You know, I have hustle in me. So I don't have a thing against hustle itself. But I do think that for the past, I don't know, I think maybe it's been a decade. I don't really know where it started, but this idea of, maybe I'm ignorant, maybe it started a long time ago, but this idea of just like working until you can't work anymore, spending 16, 20 hours a day on something, and that being the currency that people trade and the way that they kind of, you know, see if they're on, you know, on the leaderboard. To me, that's really, it's odd, and it's also dangerous. It's also something I noticed that happens from people, it's like championed by people who have a lot of help around them. It's championed and lauded by people who have full teams like I do around them to help them accomplish these things. And then the people who don't have that feel like they have to somehow aspire to that and reach those levels of hustle. I think it's almost like weight loss or someone, you know, you say, well, how did they do that? Well, maybe they had a whole team helping them with their nutrition and with their, you know, body work and all of that. You can't just take that from the cover of a magazine and say, oh, I got to be that. It's the same thing with hustle. So self-care, most people, I mean, a lot of people talk about self-care these days. It's nothing new that I'm inventing, but I just think that I just get a real thrill when people on my team are people who we've invested in or even, you know, myself. If we say, yeah, like I'm going to take off tomorrow because I just need a reset day. That's more exciting to me than saying, I'm going to go all night and figure this out and I won't go to sleep until it's done. That feels icky to me. And I think that we got to give ourselves a break more. We got not just like a break, literally like, taking more time off. We got to like let ourselves, we got to forgive ourselves more.
Mm-hmm.
And that self-care is just, should, in my opinion, should be part of your, as a leader of your company or any of your household or any of that. Self-care should be as important, again, as learning. I put that in the same sort of category, not necessarily institutional learning, but just learning and feeding your soul and your mind. But self-care should be up there with like whatever else you put on your schedule, or fundraising, or reaching certain milestones with revenue. She also say how many days this week I have on my calendar. Every week I have, every week of the year there are some days on there that remind me self-care. It should be just as important on your calendar.
Amen. I took a surf trip with a buddy of mine, 4 days, had to get away, didn't want to go the whole time, almost canceled the trip. But I think that's something we battle, is saying, hey, I'm worth taking some time for myself. I'm worth doing this so I can recharge. And it helps you build the future. And you call the future glory days. And when people mostly say glory days, they think, well, back in the past, had my leather jacket on, there's fruit punch at the dance. But I want to take this excerpt from your book that I absolutely loved, and I think really can help you explain to the people what you mean by glory days. You said, people are going to tell you you're crazy, you're too much, that this just isn't the way things are done. And then you go on to say, well, that's the point. We're not going to settle for the way things have been done in the past because we want a future that is brighter than the present. Does that define your glory days?
Yeah. I don't, similar to, I won't get political because do that 23 hours a day, but similar to this Make America Great Again idea. When was that? So to me, like the glory days don't necessarily have to be behind you. And to me, that's very exciting.
Yeah.
There's so many people who, they do feel like, oh, they're looking at other people's lives lived out and they're like, oh, I missed it. I missed out on that. It's like, no, you haven't. You've just been reminded of that it's there. So you still, as long as you're breathing, there's still a chance for you to have those glory days. And I think as a group, I'm looking forward to that as well. And it's definitely like this sort of self-motivation thing. But I truly believe in it.
Well, I love it. And it made me excited, even just reading it in your book, of like, yeah, the glory days can be in the future and we can be a part of it. And as we close today, I want to give you the chance to give any piece of advice to the viewers here today, or any area in which you see the future going with investment or technology. What can you give the people as we leave as some kind of inspiration for their journey wherever they're at to succeed?
I am very much so. In fact, whatever my next book will be mostly about this, most likely. I'm very much so excited in the same vein of glory days being ahead of us. I'm excited about us reframing and repositioning and redefining what success individually looks like to all of us. And where that core comes from is that I think Mark Cuban, who again is a good friend and a big supporter of what we're doing Backstage. I think he said that during the pandemic, he believes there's going to be a trillionaire that comes out of it, and he hopes it's a person of color. And that's really cool, and it probably will happen. But I think about like everybody, like so many people striving to become billionaires, and people telling me like, what are you going to do when you're a billionaire? And I'm just like, I hopefully will have given most of it away by the time that happens. Like I won't even reach billionaire status. So instead of being thinking about how can I catalyze 1,000 people to make the next billionaire, to find one person in that 1,000 to be the next billionaire, like so many people think. I think, how can I catalyze 1,000 people to be 1,000 millionaires? Because when you restructure that economic equality, you're reframing things far beyond economics.
Right.
It has a ripple effect in so many different directions. And that is what I see. That's why I'm so optimistic, even in the middle of a literal firestorm. I mean, I'm in Los Angeles. The state and the region is on fire. COVID is nowhere close to being ended. By the end of next year, maybe is what they're saying now. It could be when it's over, or better. We have so many things happening to our Black bodies and to our Black souls and hearts and minds, re-traumatized on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
Radical optimism is the only way I can move forward. I would crawl up into a fetal position right now if I didn't have radical optimism. Yeah. Part of that is, let's talk about how you individually are going to be a millionaire so you can take care of yourself and your family and others around you, strangers around you, rather than, striving for this place that, people, you're going to die at some point. Gary Vaynerchuk says that you're going to die one day. So you reach 1 billion, then what?
Yeah.
To what end? So anyway, the point of that is, it's like, it's exciting. It's within your reach more than you may realize. It really, really is. And let's have a lot of us there rather than just a few chosen.
Well, I love it. You can also buy her book. It's About Damn Time. It's available everywhere. It's phenomenal. Thank you, Arlan, so much. This has been amazing. You've given tremendous value. And as a Black male, I can just tell you, thank you. Your role and your example gives us all new heights to reach. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And this has been a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this for several weeks.
Hey, well, that's Denver Startup Week for you. She is Arlan Hamilton. Go get the book, learn more about her, take her advice to heart, and keep enjoying Denver Startup Week.